Welcome back everybody, including the new faces that have shown up after my first video. You've already read the title of the video, so I'm not going to explain too much, but I do have to say, if you haven't watched the first video, I recommend you watch that one first in order to get my impressions on the first 7 boosters in the game. And as a quick refresher, my design philosophy is that these boosters are supposed to be ways for the Super Destroyer to support the Helldiver. Picking up where we left off, we have the Localization Confusion booster featured in the Cutting Edge Warbond. I'd say that this is the most out there effect that would realistically not even work against the Termitids since, they don't have supply lines the same way that automatons and squids have. And also, squids kind of just teleport in. So I don't exactly know how Localization Confusion would actually, affect the other 2 factions besides the bots. Anyway, Localization Confusion increases the internal timer that enemies have in order to call in reinforcements. I'd say, just like the flexible reinforcement budget, this one needs an entire makeover. I say rename it to localized supply lines, and whenever you complete an objective, it reduces the cooldown of a resupply. This would proc on things like the main objective as well as optional objectives or secondary objectives. This would include anything that causes a pop-up on your screen, so clearing a camp, a nest, diverting fuel to the ICBM, completing a seismic probe, an escape pod, raising a SAM LiDAR or artillery station, as well as things like launching a rocket in rocket defense, or even shutting down that illegal broadcast. I gave this around a 25% cooldown reduction, so that's about 45 seconds per objective that you complete. So this means you're probably able to get a resupply after completing like raise the flag or one of your geo-survey objectives. It also means that a Helldiver who's, not really contributing to the main objective can still help you out by completing the other optional objectives around the map while you're focusing on the main objective. Not to mention this paired up with my hellpod space optimization buff. And for those of you who say that there should be a mechanic or a booster that decreases the amount of reinforcements that the enemies can call in, I actually have a solution for that. Detailed in my mission reworks, I have it so that if you complete a blitz mission or a raise the flag mission, it actually decreases the amount of enemies that are in patrols and reinforcements. Since, there's less spawners in the area, so there's less enemies that can walk into the map. And now we're on to the next, Expert Extraction Pilot, featured in the Democratic Detonation Warbond. Kinda like the Stamina Booster, this really only applies to people who want the quality of life, or are just speedrunning. Or whenever AH decides to bring back the 6-minute extraction timer. What it does is decrease the extraction shuttle ETA by 30%. And that's it. There's no other effect. In most cases, this is going to be around 30 seconds. In other cases, such as whenever you have increased cooldowns, which does affect the extraction shuttle, it will decrease it to about 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I say we rename this one to Extra Pilot Budget and also add the quality of life to Eagles, decreasing the call-in time of Eagle 1 by 1 second and decreasing the rearm time by 20%. Eagle 1 really needs some love, even though a lot of the ship modules for the hangar are really good. This just makes it so that Eagle 1 is there when you really need her. Moving on, we've got Motivational Shocks, featured in the Polar Patriots Warbond. And I'd say this one is an interesting alternative to the Muscle Booster, which decreases the effect of slows. Motivational Shock decreases the duration of slowing effects. It seems the amount that it decreases is different for each source of slow, be it earthquakes, stun, acid, snow plants. However, the duration that it decreases it by is a little inconsistent. The way I rework this is that it just automatically clears whatever slowing effect that you have after 1.5 seconds. And additionally, whenever this effect procs, and whenever you take moderate damage, around 15 or 12% of your total health, it will restore 12% of your stamina and increase your speed by 5% for 5 seconds. This effect is not going to proc on things like DOT effects, fire, gas, or by dead sprint. This should give you that extra push whenever you take some damage to just get out of the way, and it gives you the stamina so that you can actually make it there. Overall, I see this having some good synergy against the Terminids, as well as planets that have the little exploding like spore mushrooms and the ice flowers. Next up is Experimental Infusion, featured in the Viper Commandos Warbond. You might be surprised, but I didn't change this one. I actually think this one is pretty balanced. It comes with a downside, and it's up to you whether or not you want the extra damage reduction and speed at the expense of increased weapon sway, or if you're better off just taking HP or passive HP regeneration. Not trying to give away too much. And okay, this one is a doozy. Firebomb hellpods, featured in the Freedom's Flame Warbond. What it does is it increases your hellpod's demo force and stagger strength by 20 and 15 points respectively, and it applies a short incendiary radius to the landing zone of your hellpod. It's got a 4-meter radius that deals about 200 damage and lights the stuff on fire. This one needs an entire rework, because in most cases it's just grief. Most people don't like it, and it doesn't really work as intended. And in most cases, if you're gonna land a hellpod on something, it's gonna die or it's not. This booster isn't going to make it so that the ones that don't suddenly start dying. And so I've renamed this booster to the Incendiary Augmented Equipment. This booster is going to have a mechanic to where it's mutually exclusive with the other equipment augments that I have featured later. What it does is it does the same thing, so increased demo force, stagger, and the little explosion radius, but it also grants sentries, emplacements, and drones incendiary ammunition at the cost of damage. The decrease in damage isn't anything substantial. It's usually around 10 to 15 points, and most of the sentries do insane DPS, so you're not really going to notice much. Except for, your enemies being on fire. Of course, it doesn't apply to every drone and emplacement since not all of them have a projectile or can accept incendiary ammunition. Like, how is a EMS mortar or the dog breath guard dog going to suddenly have incendiary ammunition? I say that this would bring new life to this booster, as well as create kind of a booster identity that creates a playstyle around emplacements, drones, and sentries. Alright, and on to Dead Sprint, which I find, again, to be a very interesting booster. Brought to us by the Truth Enforcers Warbond, Dead Sprint makes it so that whenever we run out of stamina, we begin to drain our health in order to continue sprinting at a reduced speed. It's about a 10% reduction in sprinting speed while it's active, and it drains about 4 to 5% of your health per second. It can't kill you, but you're definitely in a state to where you're very killable. To many people, this is just bad, and if you don't have Vitality Booster, the health drain is very noticeable. So people actually end up kicking you from games if you equip Dead Sprint, especially if you join halfway in, so they actually know who you are. What I view Dead Sprint as is kind of instilling that unwavering fervor, that indomitable human spirit that only wants to achieve aura and hype moments. And because of that, I've made it so it decreases your weapon sway by about 30%. And instead of a percentile, you instead lose 2 health per second, which can't be mitigated by things that decrease the damage you receive. And for cherry on top, After not taking damage for 5 seconds, you slowly regenerate your health up to 50% at about, again, 2 HP per second, meaning it'll take about 30 seconds in order to heal all the way to half. This healing doesn't heal any injuries, but it does make it so that you don't have to stim as often. And that is if you're okay with being at half health. Otherwise, I think dead sprint is just bad. You don't run at the same speed, so unless you're wearing light armor, you're not outrunning any of your melee pursuers, and the health drain either contributes to deaths in engagements, and outside of burning a stim, you only get about 13 to 32 seconds worth of extra sprinting distance. And if covering distance is your goal, I mean, you're already using a stim, or you could just bring a movement backpack like the warp pack, jump pack, or even the FRV. Heck, even the stamina booster. Why would you need to trade health for stamina if you could just have more stamina? I say that these changes give this booster some offensive function as well as some defensive utility. The less sway is also just kind of inspired by that scene in Jinro where they're walking down the sewer, just shooting their machine guns. And something that you can't really effectively do since, you know, your weapon sways so much while you move. And on to the next. Armed resupply pods, featured in the Urban Legends Warbond. What it does is adds a 140 round Liberator Penetrator to the top of your supply pod. That's it. I say this is situationally useful and can end up getting you killed if your turret shoots you while you're being chased by an enemy. So, yeah. Let's give this one a bit more meat. I say let's rename it to Increased Defense Reserves Booster. What it does is it adds that same 140 round Liberator Penetrator to the top of resupplies, mine deployers, and the shield generator emplacement. And but let's bump up the round count from 140 to 200. That sounds good. Oh, and additionally, sentries and emplacements get 25% increased ammo capacity. This added with my equipment augment booster concept makes it so that you can make an effective sentry loadout. Not to mention, I mean, sentries already are a risk reward if they get either overpowered by the horde of enemies or just get one shot by like a charger, harvester, bile titan, you know, the usual things that just kill your turret as soon as it pops up. Alright, and next is Sample Extricator, featured in the Borderline Justice Warbond. Overall, I think that this booster is quite limited in its function, since I believe the reason why it can't spawn rare or super samples is because there's the possibility that it could drop rare and super samples on a difficulty where they don't normally spawn. I also think that the implementation is very basic, since enemies just drop a sample container instead of there being unique models, but also at the same time I think it's convenient to see them on the map. From what we've been able to figure out on the wiki, it is about a 0.1% drop chance, and enemies such as Bile Titans, Impalers, Hulks, Warstriders, and Harvesters are the only enemies that can drop them. My rework renames this to the Enemy Extricator. The new effect is that medium enemies have a chance to drop ammo boxes, grenade boxes, and stim cases. Depending on the difficulty of the mission, if there are no medium class enemies, it's just the largest enemy available. I've made it about a 1 in 500 or 0.5% chance, with about a 50% chance for it to be ammo, 30% chance for it to be a grenade, and the remaining 20% chance for it to be stims. Additionally, I've improved the sample dropping function of this booster and made it so that there is a 0.1% chance for common samples, a 0.05% chance for rare samples, and a 0.01% for super samples. The amount of samples that you can get per mission is based off of the difficulty level, and I'll flash up the table that I have for that. I'd say that this booster is pretty useless unless there is a major order that requires us to get specifically common samples, or you're on rocket defense or eradication where there are very few samples that spawn on the mission, if any at all. And as for the in-lore reason why I think that this booster would even work, is that we could just say that the Super Destroyer's radar crew actively scans enemy remains for usable materials, such as samples and the consumable munitions, the ammo grenade stims. Helldivers don't have time to stop and loot enemies. However, our very adequately paid ship crew definitely have the time to. And on to Sample Scanner. The booster that doesn't scan for samples, and featured in the Masters of Ceremony Warbond. Overall, I actually think this booster is quite nice. It's one of the few boosters that actually shows you the number of the effect that it's providing you. And it's very nice for new players who are looking to upgrade their ship modules, or players that are 120 and just want to help out fund the DSS. So I've only done some minor revisions to this. I've decreased the chance to double the samples from 15 to 12%, which is only going to change it from a 1 in 7 to a 1 in 8. And this is to compensate for the extra effect that I'm adding, which is that it actually scans for nearby samples. Whenever you look on your map, it shows you where the samples are. I think that the ability to reliably collect every single sample in a mission more than makes up for the decreased chance to double the sample. Plus, if you pair this with, say, the UAV recon booster, you can give a heads up to your fellow divers that are nearby samples that they haven't picked up. And finally, the last booster that we received, stun pods, featured in the Force of Law Warbond. Just like my Firebomb hellpods booster, I've changed it so that this is now the stun augmented equipment, meaning that it includes the buffs that it has to the hellpod, but now also has the effect of granting sentries and placements in drones stun ammunition at the cost of damage. This gives sentries and guard dogs more of a defensive utility, giving you more space, and you'll definitely notice that enemies aren't on your ass 24/7, since, they're just going to be sit off in a corner shaking their head. Again, some people may consider this grief, but they're definitely not going to complain that enemies aren't attacking them. And with that wraps up all of my booster reworks. If you'd like to see how I would rework armor passives, ship modules, and mission rewards, be sure to like and subscribe, then let me know that you want to continue seeing this content. I've made a slight improvement in people who are subscribed from 100% down to 99%. And to the 300 people who decided to subscribe after one video, I'd like to thank everybody for the support that you've given me this far, even though it's only been a couple of days. I've been very surprised on how prolific this video has gotten. Until next time.